That's what Mobile Suit Gundam's about. Hi, I'm Sarah McClintock. I'm a costume designer, I'm a cosplayer, and whenever I watch things, I pay attention to the clothing. When I watched through the 1979 anime series Mobile Suit Gundam, I find myself absolutely entranced by just everything it had to say about fashion. I may have misled you somewhat here by including the word fashion in the title of this video, because you probably think of fashion as something like this, but what I want to talk about is dress. Dress is all clothing, but it's also accessories like jewellery, makeup, and even hair and tattoos. Dress is everything that you add to your body to curate its appearance. Unlike the word fashion, which we generally use to refer to garments that are fashionable, the word dress is far broader in scope, and that's what I want to talk about here today. So Amuro, right, is of him in a state of undress. One of the first lines in the show is his friend Frau Bo saying to him,
"You've got to hurry and get dressed, Amuro."
So dress is immediately established as a factor in this show, which in animated media isn't always the case. We tend to think about animated characters as having character design rather than costumes. So what this introduction of Amuro is doing, aside from establishing him as a computer nerd totally disconnected from the world, in showing us that he needs to be dressed, it's highlighting that he is a person who has a body. This show is constantly reminding us that its characters have bodies, the bodies they need to take care of, they need to eat and sleep and wash. And in the context of a mech show, this seems significant. The show's called Mobile Suit Gundam. We're piloting giant robot war death machines in the shape of bodies. And to unpack what all this means, we're going to employ a little piece of 20th century philosophy called the theory of embodied existence from French phenomenologist Maurice Merleau-Ponty. Merleau-Ponty's main field of study was with perception, and he wrote about how our bodies are the site from which we perceive and interact with the world. So, one might, to borrow a term from gaming, think of the body as the user interface between the self and the world. Because of this, everything that you experience is shaped by your body. And more specifically, by the sense that you have of your own body. Your appearance and self-image and your feeling of mass and touch. All of this stuff about you, which comes from feedback from the world, coalesces together into what Merleau-Ponty calls your corporeal schema. Now, the corporeal schema essentially describes what it feels like to exist as a person with a body. And in Mobile Suit Gundam, a lot of care has been taken to animate each character with a distinctive body language. The viewer is given a sense that these characters experience the world through their bodies. A pilot in a mobile suit experiences, firstly, that mobile suit through their body, and secondly, experiences the world through that mobile suit. And that means that the mobile suit occupies basically exactly the same niche that clothing does relative to the body. Now, to really understand why this is, we've got to go back to Merleau-Ponty, who writes that the world, from the individual's perspective, starts from the body and goes outward. Every object in the world relates to the body in some way, and there's no relationship more intimate than the one between the body and its dress. Just like the mobile suits, our body interacts with our clothing, and our clothing is what interacts with the world. Socially, physically, and emotionally, our dress sort of stands in for the self in all our interactions with the world. So changing your dress will change your experience of the world. Now, that clothing affects your identity and how others perceive that identity is the basis of literally everything I do as a costume designer. You know, I don't need 1940s French phenomenology to tell me that changing my clothes is going to change how I feel or act, but understanding embodied existence helps explain why this is. And Mobile Suit Gundam demonstrates this effect that clothing has on the self, through the Gundam, yes, but also through normal clothing, and in particular through Amuro's military uniform. In episode 13, Amuro wears this uniform to go visit his mother. And this episode really stands out to me because its plot is driven by how visible he is as a soldier of the Earth Federation.
Wow, cool! That's a real fighter plane!
Could you hide your plane for us, please, son?
Go hide it quickly. Don't move a muscle, okay?
We heard that an enemy fighter may have landed.
Amuro gets this uniform in episode 3, and we can see it really doesn't fit him. A uniform means something. It means dedication to a group and to the ideals of that group. Military dress implies military discipline, obedience, loyalty, fighting skills, masculinity, etc. And Amuro's uniform is this visible and physical reminder that he is now supposed to live up to these ideals. But the computer nerd we see at the start of the show is fundamentally incompatible with all this.
I brought you food and clean
Amuro
clothes.
is forced into this uniform by
Your clothes are
circumstance,
starting to smell a bit.
in the same way that he's forced into piloting Gundam. The first 12 episodes of this show demonstrate how Amuro fails to live up to every expectation of his uniform, and the significant trauma he experiences at having to still do so anyway. The weight of this trauma renders him catatonic by episode 12, but then in episode 13 he goes to visit his mother, and he chooses to wear this uniform. And in episode 13 we see how much he's changed. He fits this uniform now. At the end of the episode, he says goodbye to his mother and returns to White Base. We see him salute and turn with this implied heel click, and that's a gesture that his commanding officer Noah Bright repeats just a second later. We're shown that his body language has changed and that he thinks of himself as a soldier now. Even if his uniform isn't the main cause of this change, it's still the thing that directs the flow of his growth. There are several more sartorially interesting moments that I could discuss, but hopefully I've given you the tools to examine them yourself while watching or rewatching this show. They all tend to be pivotal moments where a character creates a new self or destroys an old one. Because Mobile Suit Gundam really acknowledges that dress is part of the self and that changing your dress changes you. I must admit, it seems a little nonsensical to read the Gundam as a piece of clothing. And this is because the way the show presents mobile suits to us, is overwhelmingly as bodies. And in particular, Gundam is shown to be uniquely Amuro's body through visual comparisons between pilot and mobile suit, through how attached he is to it, and how much over the course of the show he really grows to embody Gundam. That Gundam is both Amuro's clothing and body is not a contradiction, and in fact, what Mobile Suit Gundam can teach us about fashion theory is that dress is part of the body. That dress can be part of the social and emotional body is a relatively easy thing to understand. To be undressed is to be outside of mainstream society, and the way clothing, or even certain items of clothing, can be so synonymous to our identity as to almost feel like a part of the body itself is something that Mobile Suit Gundam explores pretty thoroughly with Char Aznable and his mask. But to explore the physical expansion of the body beyond skin level, we're going to have to venture into the realm of science fiction a little bit here. I've already talked about how we experience the world through our bodies, which in turn experience the world through our dress. You know, you can still sense and feel things through the cloth of your clothing, but your clothing isn't usually doing the experiencing for you. Usually. This show could be described as the story of one boy's synthesis with a machine. It's significant that Amuro is a teenager because this is a story about growth and growing into a new adult body. Amuro's journey towards adulthood starts out with this fumbling step of Gundam, and with every episode that passes, he gets more and more in sync with this new mechanical body. And this journey is complex. It's tied to his growing ego, his growing trauma, his sense of purpose, emotional maturity. But the results of all these different areas of growth always get expressed through his piloting skill. And he improves and improves so much that one reaches a point in this show where you think, this boy cannot possibly get any better at piloting Gundam. And then the words corporeal schema describe the way it feels to exist in a body. And Amuro, in achieving synthesis with it, exists with Gundam as his body. So what then happens to his corporeal schema? What happens to his embodied self when the body he embodies is so world-shatteringly powerful? I'm going to pause here, because if you haven't seen the 1979 anime Mobile Suit Gundam, aka Gundam 0079, aka First Gundam, but would perhaps like to, maybe I've piqued your interest, now is the time to go and do that. Because I'm about to delve into some major finale arc spoilers. Off you go. Go on, go watch them. Great. Okay, folks, now that it's just us, let's talk about Newtypes. Newtypes make so much sense in the context of the mobile suit. I mean, what else was going to happen whenever human beings augment themselves with technology in order to leave Earth behind and live in space, if not an expanded definition of what it means to be human expressed as cool space magic? It's simple transhumanism, folks. And the route that Mobile Suit Gundam takes through all this starts out establishing humans as embodied beings. The show spends its time building this model of existence, just so it can then start dismantling it, with the introduction of Lala Sune. Lala first appears in episode 33, and she marks a significant shift in the show's approach to the body. Unlike the rest of our main cast, she does not have a distinctive body language. She never eats, she never sleeps, and she barely even walks. Look at this scene, where the rest of its occupants are standing or walking. Lala floats. Her movement isn't connected to her body's movement. This takes place in a low-gravity environment. Char, walking behind her, is walking because that's normal for him. But Lala's normal is different. This scene's surrealness really demonstrates how othered Lala is. Everything about her is designed to set her apart from the other characters. A big part of that is, of course, her racial coding as Indian, right down to the bindi on her forehead. And that Lala's race is being used as a sort of surface level signifier of enlightenment or mysticism, that's a widespread problem in media. But Mobile Suit Gundam uses it in tandem with her childlike attitude, her detachment from her physical body, all to demonstrate a new type of existence. An existence that isn't centered on the body. Lala and Amuro, even though they're both Newtypes, they fall at opposite ends of this corporeal spectrum. We see this most clearly, actually, in the designs of their mobile suits. Gundam is pretty much the most human-shaped mobile suit in this show. You know, it's got broad shoulders, a slim waist, and design elements that evoke pectorals, calves, you know, and of course, let's not forget about its phallic protrusion. Altogether, Gundam represents this idealized, quote-unquote, male figure. And contrast this with Lala's Elmuth, which is so unhumanoid that, out of context, it could just be read as another spacecraft, if not for the fact that this show has put in 40-something episodes of design development that demand you see this craft as being Lala's body. There's a genealogy of mobile suits in 0079 that connects the Gundam directly to the Elmuth. We start out with Gundam and the Zakus. These are bodies, says the show to us. And then we meet Gun Tank, Gun Cannon, the Goof, the Doms. These are also bodies. And then comes Gog, Zagok, Akai, Zok, mobile armor gets introduced. There's the Big Bro, Brow Bro, Ball, Big Zam. Every one is less humanoid than the last. But they all fulfill the same purpose and occupy the same niche relative to the body that Gundam does. The last mobile suit to be introduced is the Zeong. And this marks Char's transition into a new type. And it shows us that part of this transition is Char letting go of his idea of what a human body should be.
But it has no legs.
Legs are just for show. The brass doesn't understand things like that.
Because Mobile Suit Gundam, in the end, discards the body, or rather, moves past it. Gundam is destroyed. Gundam has to be destroyed, because Amuro, like a teenager outgrowing their clothes, has outgrown Gundam. He saves the crew of White Base in the last episode using only his mind, almost as if, in discarding his Gundam body, he no longer has need of his normal body either. Transhumanism is often portrayed as this invasive, surgical process. But Mobile Suit Gundam's approach to it can show us that transhumanism is accessible to you and me through fashion. Because dress mediates all these relationships between the self, body, and world. That you can read the mobile suits as clothing, as body, as self, shows us just how connected all these things are. They are all part of our experience of existing, and that experience is an embodied one. Dress might just be the most important part of embodied existence. The body itself is dress because it's saturated with meaning. Society dresses us in our body's size, shape, colour, and we don't get to choose those meanings, certainly not on an individual level, but we do get to dress ourselves. And in dressing ourselves, we get to mediate this relationship that the body has with the world. Dress is the liminal space where the world and the body meet. But this line can be far broader than just the thickness of a piece of cloth. Dress sinks its meaning into the body while also extending out into the world. Just like the Gundam does, dress can increase the body's physical capacity, increase its presence, its social and cultural impact. Dress can allow the self to transcend the body. And that's it. That's what fashion is about. Hey guys, I just wanted to come in at the end of the video and give a quick shout out to 2 podcasts. The first one is Mobile Suit Breakdown, which is a really great podcast. They do like a deep dive into the sort of cultural context that surrounds Gundam, just really, really great for knowledge base, and actually indirectly inspired a lot of this video essay. The other podcast that I want to shout out is one that ignores all of that stuff and just says, wow, cool robot. And that's the one that I'm on. I am hosting Wow Cool Robot as a guest with my friend Max and Colin during Zeta Gundam. And funnily enough, a lot of the concepts and themes established in this video apply even more in Zeta Gundam. So if you want to hear me kind of talk about and make fun jokes about that, then come and listen to Wow Cool Robot. You can find us on Twitter at Wow Cool Podcast. And if you just want to kind of talk to me personally about some of the things that you find in this, you can find me on Twitter at Sarah McCostumes. That's SarahMcC Costumes.